I'm going to talk to you about the principles of color correcting in this tutorial because it's worth getting your footage looking as good as possible, even if it's only for your own consumption. Now, the topic of color correction is vast and could take up a whole course of its own. So here, I'll just give you an overview of what's possible to allow you to get started color correcting your footage. We'll continue by looking further at this clip that we saw in the last couple of tutorials. At first glance, you'd probably think there's nothing very much wrong with it in terms of the color. Possibly it needs its contrast adjusting, but the color seems to be fine. Well, that's where one of the filters I'm about to show you helps us, because at first glance our clips can be deceptive. We'll also look at using different viewing modes available in the reference panel. So let's get started. Here's our clip in the program monitor. By the way, you'll notice my workspace during this tutorial will be different to what we're used to. I'm going to set up the color correction workspace, found by going to Window and selecting the third option down, Color Correction. Okay, so now our panels are positioned in different places around the user interface. In particular, we see two views of the clips. This will become important as we progress. So, set like this, let's look at adding one of the color correction effects that we can use. I'll select the clip and go to the effects panel and open up video effects. Within here, I'll choose the color correction folder and go for this effect, Fast Color Corrector. I'll left click and drag and drop down onto our clip. Now, if I open the effect controls panel, we see these many parameters available to us to use to correct our clip's color. On the whole, it's visually dominated by this color wheel or this color dial. Before we use it, I'll go down to the bottom right of our user interface and resize our panels to make use of our limited screen recording size. At present, we see the same view as our main program monitor in that we see our clip. But this reference panel offers so much more in terms of visual tools to help correct problematic footage. For example, come to the top right of the panel and select this context menu. Down in this section, we see at present, we are set to view in this reference panel the composite video, and that's why we could see it, of course. But look at the multitude of options below within this category. What I'll do is I'll quickly flick through them all, and then we'll go back to a couple of them to have a slightly closer look. This one, All Scopes, is useful in that we see 4 different graphical information views about the clip's color balance, contrast, lightness and darkness areas. If you want to fill this reference panel with just one view at a time, then flick through these various options. I realize at the moment they look quite bewildering at first glance, but as soon as you adjust your clip, whilst keeping your eye on how these various scopes update, you'll soon pick up how they provide visual information useful to you. This YC waveform, for example, provides information about the lightness and darkness values of your clips, and therefore is good to reference when adapting a clip in terms of these parameters. Alternatively, you can visually break down the clip into color ranges. So, as I say, keep your eye on any of these to see how they change as you alter a clip's color or the contrast, etc. Right, let's have a look at using the Fast Color Corrector. Now, I'm actually going to add a second version of this. You don't need to, it's just a habit I get into. I do it so I can make different changes within each and vacillate between the two to see which I prefer, i.e. one corrected in terms of color and one as a filmic style. I might push it a little bit, or maybe quite a lot, so I can get an edgy sort of filmic style. As I say, you don't need to do this, of course, it's just a habit I get into. Anyway, regardless of whether you use one or two, let's have a quick look at what's on offer. Maybe the first thing I'd do is use the tools to correct any color cast that the clip might have. I can do this by clicking on this color picker to set the white balance. Now I need to change to our video view first though, from the scope views, and then I'll click on a part of the clip that I know is white. For example, these houses are painted white, so I'll use them as my white balance reference point. You'll notice as I select a house, the color cast corrects to compensate for this white balance resetting. Notice too, in the color wheel here, our central dot has moved slightly, to indicate we are forced to shift in color to correct what was the wrong white exposure initially. Of course, there are a lot of parameters available to manually fine-tune our clips. As I say, time is against us, so I can't explain them all. So instead, if you want to use automatic options rather than manually adjusting, come down to the saturation area here and click on any of these 3 buttons, or all of them I suppose, to set the auto black level, auto contrast, or the auto white level. Or as I did say, you can further modify your clip by manually tweaking the color wheel. Grab the point here and drag to either subtly or dramatically affect the color cast of your clip. Now I'm just going to edit and undo a couple of times to revert back to our color picked white balance from those white painted coastal houses. Okay, so I'm going to leave it here now that we've had an introduction to color correction, and we've set up this particular workspace that allows us to use any of those different scope views to visually determine what needs to change within our clip should there be a color problem.